This isn't a love letter. At least, it's not supposed to be. I'm sitting in the back of the library, behind the shelf no one touches, writing this on a torn page from my math notebook. The pencil I'm using is too short. My fingers are smudged with lead. I can hear the ticking of the clock on the wall and the rain hitting the window. That kind of soft rain that doesn't ask for attention but stays with you. I keep telling myself, this letter is nothing, just thoughts, just a way to clear my head. But then I write his name. James. I see him every Thursday, always in the same place. McCall's Hardware on Main Street. He's usually at the counter, wiping it down, sketching something on a paper bag, or counting screws with careful fingers. He doesn't know me, not really. Just another face in a town full of routine. But I see him, and every time I do, something inside me stirs. It's not loud. It's not even clear. It's just there. A quiet warmth in my chest, mixed with something that almost hurts. I don't understand these feelings, not completely. I've tried to push them away, tried to say, it's nothing, or you're just being strange. But the truth is, when I hear his voice, even just a hey there, my day feels different. The thing is, I don't know what this means. Boys don't write about other boys, not like this. At least, not out loud. So I write here, in secret. I remember the first time I noticed him. I was 12. He was helping a woman carry wood to her truck. He smiled at her like it was the easiest thing in the world. That smile stuck with me. I didn't know why. I still don't fully understand. Lately, I've been making excuses to go to the hardware store. I pretend I need something. Glue, nails, rope, anything. Just so I can see him. Talk to him. Hear the soft way he says, Eli, like my name means something. I don't think he knows. He can't. But sometimes I wonder. Sometimes when our eyes meet, there's a moment, tiny and quiet, where it feels like he sees me too. Not just a kid buying tools, but someone else. Someone waiting for something they're too scared to name. I wish I could tell him, but I won't, because this isn't a love letter. It's just something I needed to write, even if no one ever reads it. The first time I really saw James, I was standing in front of a shelf full of nails. Long ones, short ones I didn't know the names for. My dad had sent me to pick up some screws, but I got distracted, trying to look like I knew what I was doing. That's when he appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just reached up and pulled down a small box, handing it to me like it was nothing. His fingers were stained with black ink, like he'd been drawing just before. I came in, Philip's head, he said simply. These are the kind you want for cabinets. I nodded, too quick, and took the box. Our hands didn't touch, not really, but close enough that I noticed how careful he was. Not slow, just gentle. His voice wasn't loud either. Calm, low. The kind of voice you could miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was. I thanked him, paid, and walked out. I didn't even remember if I got the right thing until I got home. But the name on his shirt, James, stuck in my head. After that, I started noticing him everywhere. On my way home from school, sweeping outside the store, sitting on the porch step during his break, sketching something in a notebook with a broken pencil. Once, I saw him draw a bird that had landed on the edge of a flower pot. He looked up at it, smiled to himself, and drew with quick, sure hands. He always had that ink on his fingers. Not messy, just enough to say, I make things. It was different from the usual grease and dirt most boys around here wore on their skin. James was quiet, but in a way that made people lean in, listen harder. One day, I passed him on the street. He was carrying a wooden crate full of jars. I opened the door to the store for him, and he said, "Thanks, Eli," like it was the most natural thing in the world to know my name. He remembered me. I almost stumbled over my own feet. He didn't say anything more, just kept walking, the wood creaking under his arm. I stood there holding the door long after he disappeared inside. After that, I started thinking about him more. Not in big movie scene ways, just small thoughts, quiet ones, like wondering what he was drawing, or what kind of music he liked, or if he ever felt as out of place in this town as I did. I never talked about it with anyone, not even myself, not really, just kept it tucked away, like a folded note in a coat pocket, easy to hide, easy to pretend it wasn't there, but it was there. One Saturday, I saw him sketching on a brown paper bag. I was pretending to browse the shelf of paint samples, stealing glances. He was drawing a leaf, I think, or a wing, something soft. His eyes didn't leave the page. I wanted to ask him about it. I wanted to say, "You're good at that," or "Do you draw a lot?" But my throat felt tight, and my tongue stayed still. So I watched, quietly, until he looked up. Our eyes met. It lasted only a second, maybe not even that long, but in that second something shifted. His look wasn't curious. It wasn't cold. It was soft. Like he saw me standing there. Really, saw me. Not just as a kid with messy hair and nervous fingers, but as someone trying. I looked away too fast. My face burned, and I grabbed a can of varnish without reading the label. When I got home, I opened the varnish and realized it wasn't even the right kind, but I didn't care. That week, I started thinking about James even more. The way his hands moved. The way he smiled like he knew a secret. The soft curve of his voice when he said my name. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew I wanted to go back. It started small. Every Thursday after school, I'd walk past McCall's Hardware. Sometimes I'd go in. Sometimes I'd just slow down outside and peek through the window to see if James was there. He usually was. There was always a reason to go in. At least, that's what I told myself. Sandpaper, glue, a bolt that didn't fit anything. My dad didn't notice that we suddenly had a lot of extra tools and no new shelves. James noticed me though. "You're back," he said one Thursday. Grinning a little, he leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "I needed something," I said, holding up a small box of nails. I didn't, but I couldn't stop smiling. He nodded. "Those are good ones. Brass finish." I looked down at the box like it meant something. "They're for a birdhouse. You building it?" I paused. "Yeah." He tilted his head, curious. "For real?" "No," I admitted, and we both laughed. That's how it began. We started talking more. Nothing deep, just little things. "What music do you listen to? Do you like cats or dogs? Ever seen snow in April?" Sometimes he asked the questions. Sometimes I did. The words came easier each week. Not fast, not loud, just slow and comfortable, like warm socks or the smell of coffee. And I started noticing things. He always wore the same grey sweater when it got cold. It had a tiny hole near the cuff, but he didn't seem to care. When he was thinking, he tapped his pencil against the counter, and when someone talked too much, he'd smile politely, but scratch his wrist, like he was looking for a way out. Started timing my visits just right. I'd wait until the store was quiet, usually around 4. That's when the sun hit the windows in a soft, golden way, and James wasn't busy. One Thursday, I stayed longer than usual. I asked him what he was sketching that day. He looked a little surprised, then shrugged. "Nothing much, just trying to get this bird right." He turned the paper around, and I saw a small drawing of a blue jay on a fence. The lines were soft, but sure, and the bird looked like it might fly off the page. "It's beautiful," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me, not smiling, just quiet, like he was trying to hear something. "Thanks," he said. "Most people don't care about this stuff." "I do," I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just full. I used to draw all the time, I added. Before school got hard. Before I got scared I wasn't good enough. He nodded slowly. You should start again. I don't think I remember how. Start with something simple, he said, like a tree, or a leaf, or someone's eyes. My heart did something strange at that last part. I looked down. Maybe. After that he started showing me his sketches more often. Not all of them, just one or two, tucked into his back pocket, or on scrap paper near the register. One was a shoe left in the middle of the road. Another was a rain gutter full of leaves. They weren't just pictures, they were quiet stories. And every Thursday, I found another reason to be there. One week, I brought him a pack of pencils, just regular number 2s. I said my school had extras. He smiled and said, "Thanks. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I replied. He didn't say anything else, but he opened the pack right away and used one of them to draw. I watched his hand move, smooth, light, like he didn't even have to think. Something in my chest ached. Not a sad ache, just something full. I didn't have a name for it. I still don't, not really. But I knew that when Thursday came, I'd be back. It was late October when I found out James liked old records. I'd just stepped into the store. The bell over the door jingled like always, but something was different. The air was warmer somehow, fuller. I realized it was music, soft, grainy, and humming through a small radio on the counter. A man's voice, low and slow, singing about a river. James was tapping his fingers to the rhythm, head tilted slightly as he listened. He didn't look up right away. "Who is that?" I asked. He turned, smiling a little. "Sam Cooke." The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. "It's nice." "Yeah," he said, looking back at the little record player behind the counter. "My uncle gave me a box of records, said I could have them as long as I didn't scratch. Anything." I stepped closer, listening. "It sounds like rain and sunshine at the same time." James chuckled. "That's a good way to put it." We didn't talk much that day, we just listened. The store was mostly empty, just us and the music. I stood near the counter pretending to read a label on a paint can, but really I was listening to the way James hummed under his breath, quietly, like he didn't even know he was doing it. The next Thursday, I asked him if he had any other records. He did. Lots. He told me about Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Billie Holiday. I didn't know most of the names, but I liked the way he talked about them, like they were old friends. He pulled out a record from behind the counter. "You should borrow this one." I looked at it. A woman on the cover, her eyes closed, lips open like she was mid-song. "You sure?" I asked. "I don't want to mess it up." "You won't," he said. Then, as he handed it to me, our fingers brushed. Just a second. Just enough to feel the warmth of his skin against mine. My heart jumped. Not a big leap. Just a soft skip. He noticed. I think. But he didn't say anything. He just smiled. That night, I played the record over and over in my room. The voice filled the walls like candlelight. Smooth, a little sad, a little sweet. I lay on my bed, the record spinning, and stared at the ceiling. I imagined James listening to it in the store. I imagined him humming. I wondered if he'd ever danced with someone, or wanted to. The next day at school, I couldn't stop thinking about the music, about the moment our hands touched. I brought the record back the following Thursday, careful not to smudge the sleeve. "Did you like it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It made the house feel different, warmer." He nodded, folding a paper bag. "That's what good music does." We stood there for a moment, not talking, just breathing in the quiet. I said, "I think I like music more than I thought." He grinned. "That's the first step." We didn't say anything else for a while. He rang up a customer, I watched the dust float in the light from the window. When the store emptied again, he leaned on the counter and looked at me. "You always come on Thursdays." I froze a little. "Yeah." "Why Thursdays?" I swallowed. "I don't know, just works with my schedule." He smiled, like he didn't believe me but didn't mind. "Okay," he said. Before I left that day, he handed me another record. "Try this one," he said. "It's a little sad, but good." "Thanks," I whispered. He looked at me for a second too long, and I looked back. I left the store with the record clutched to my chest, my fingers tingling. That night, I sat on the floor, the music filling my room, and I closed my eyes. I let myself think about James, about his voice, his smile, the way his hands moved when he drew. I didn't say the word out loud, but I thought it. Love. Maybe not yet, maybe not fully, but something close, something growing. And like the music, it stayed with me, even after the song ended. It happened on a Tuesday, not a Thursday. That was the first surprise. I was walking past the store after school, like I always did, even though I told myself I wouldn't. The door was closed, the windows glowing gold from the low afternoon sun. James was out back, sitting on the old loading dock with a notebook in his lap. He looked up and saw me, then he waved. I hesitated for just a second, then walked around the building and toward him. My heart beat too fast, but I tried to act like it didn't. "You're early," he said. I laughed a little. "You're outside." He moved over, patting the space beside him. "Sit." So I did. The wood was rough beneath me. A warm breeze carried the scent of sawdust and something sweet, maybe honeysuckle from the fence behind us. The air felt easier here, quieter. James kept drawing. His pencil scratched softly across the page. I watched his hand move, slow and steady. "What are you drawing?" I asked. He turned the notebook toward me. It was a sky, half-finished clouds and a few birds in the distance. The lines were soft, almost floating. "It's nice," I said. He shrugged. "Just something from memory." "From where?" "My grandmother's farm," he said, "out near the river. We used to sit on the porch and watch the clouds move. She always said you could tell the time by how they stretched." I smiled. "That sounds peaceful." It was. He looked down. "I liked it there. Felt like I could breathe. Don't you feel that way here?" He paused, then shook his head. "Not really. Not all the time." I nodded. I understood. "Sometimes I feel like I'm holding my breath," I said. "Even when I'm not doing anything, just sitting in class or walking home, like I'm waiting for something, but I don't know what." He looked over at me. "Yeah, me too." There was a silence after that, but it wasn't empty. I listened to the sounds around us, the hum of a far-off lawnmower, the soft creak of the loading dock under our weight, the whistle of wind through the trees. James closed his notebook and leaned back on his elbows, staring at the sky. "Do you ever think about leaving?" I asked him. "All the time," he said without blinking. "Where would you go?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Somewhere where no one looks at you like you're wrong." My chest tightened. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. "And you?" he asked, turning his head toward me. "I don't know," I said. "Somewhere with bookstores, maybe by the ocean." He smiled softly. "That sounds good." The light was starting to fade now. The sky turned soft orange and purple, and the edges of everything glowed. James sat up and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped candy and handed it to me. "Root beer," he said. I took it. "Thanks." We both unwrapped them and sat there sucking on the candy, the sweetness melting slowly on our tongues. "I don't really talk to people like this," I said after a while. "Me neither," he replied. "I feel like I'm not pretending when I'm with you." He turned toward me again. "You're not." I didn't know what to say to that, but the way he said it, quiet, certain, made something inside me loosen. We didn't touch. We didn't move closer, but it felt like we did. Just sitting there, side by side, was enough. The wind picked up a little, ruffling James's hair. I wanted to reach out and smooth it down, but I didn't. Not yet. I wish more days felt like this, I whispered. He nodded. Me too. We stayed there until the sun dipped below the rooftops. Neither of us wanted to be the first to leave, but eventually, the shadows stretched long and the cold began to settle in. James stood and offered his hand to help me up. I hesitated, then took it. His hand was warm, steady. For a second, we stood too close. Not by accident, just not moving. See? You Thursday? He asked. Yeah, I said. Thursday. As I walked home, my fingers remembered the shape of his hand, the calm weight of it, the quiet way it held mine and let go too soon. That night, I wrote it all down in my notebook. Not a poem, not a letter, just a memory, a soft one, a place to breathe. The letter wasn't supposed to leave my room. I'd written it weeks ago, on a night when the rain wouldn't stop tapping on my window and I couldn't sleep. It wasn't neat. The ink smudged where I pressed too hard. Some words were crossed out. Others trailed off like I was afraid to finish the thought. It started with, "This isn't a love letter. At least, it's not supposed to be." I didn't sign it. I didn't even say his name, but it was about James. Every word, every sentence whispered about him, about Thursdays, about the way his eyes softened when he smiled, about how I felt like a real person when he talked to me, and how I was scared to say what it all meant out loud. I tucked the letter into a book on my shelf and forgot about it, or I tried to. Then, last Thursday, I'd brought James a book, one he mentioned wanting to read. I didn't think twice, just slipped it into my bag and handed it to him after we talked about music. He smiled, thanked me, and slid it under the counter. I didn't remember the letter until I got home. My stomach dropped. I ran to my room, pulled the book off the shelf, and found the space empty. The letter was gone. I hardly slept. All I could see was James opening the book and the letter falling out like a secret I couldn't take back. I imagined him reading it, frowning, folding it back up, maybe laughing, maybe never speaking to me. Again, I thought about not going back. Skipping Thursday, avoiding the store, but I couldn't. So I went. The walk there felt longer than usual. I kept wiping my palms on my jeans. The bell over the door sounded louder than ever. James was behind the counter, as always. But when he looked up and saw me, something in his face changed. Not a frown, not a smile either. He reached under the counter and pulled out the letter. My heart stopped. He didn't hand it to me, didn't tear it up. He just held it gently in both hands, like it was something fragile. "I found this," he said. His voice was soft, no anger in it, no teasing, just quiet. I couldn't speak. He opened it, read the first line out loud. "This isn't a love letter." Then he looked at me. "But it is, isn't it?" I nodded. Barely. My chest felt tight. My whole body buzzed with fear. He didn't say anything right away. He folded the letter back, up and placed it on the counter. "I didn't mean to read it," he said. I opened the book and it just fell out. I swallowed. I wasn't going to send it. I know. He paused, then reached into his sketchbook. I didn't know what to say, he said, so I drew this. He slid a piece of paper across the counter. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was us, sitting on the back dock, side by side, our legs hanging over the edge. The sky above us was filled with light pencil strokes, soft clouds stretching wide. We weren't touching, but we were close, closer than we'd ever been. I looked up. My eyes burned, but I blinked it away. "I didn't know you saw me like that," I whispered. "I didn't either," he said. "Not until I read your words and realized I feel the same. I didn't breathe. He looked at me. Really looked. I don't know what this is supposed to be. I just know I like being with you. I look for you every Thursday. I wait for the bell to ring. I laughed. A tiny, breathless laugh. Me too. I didn't want to assume anything, he said. Didn't want to make things weird. They were already weird, I said, smiling now. He laughed too. A quiet sound, full of relief. Then he reached across the counter and touched the back of my hand, just for a moment. His thumb brushed gently over my skin, like he was making sure I was real. I didn't pull away. He let go, but slowly, like he didn't want to. We stood there in the soft light of the store, not saying much, just looking, just knowing. It wasn't a confession, not the kind people write in stories. There were no big speeches, no music swelling in the background, just a sketch, a letter, a look. That was enough. Before I left, he slid the letter back to me. "Keep it," he said, "or don't." But it meant something to me. I took it carefully, like it might fall apart in my hands. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll see you next Thursday," he asked. I nodded. Always. When I got home, I tucked the letter inside the back of my notebook. I didn't read it again. I didn't have to. Something had changed. Quietly, gently, and I think we both knew. It wasn't just a letter anymore. It was the start of something true. It started to rain just after school let out. Big, heavy drops that hit the pavement like small drums. I didn't have an umbrella, but I didn't go home either. I walked slower than usual, letting the rain soak through my sweater and drip from my hair. Something about the sky, grey and soft, like a wool blanket, matched how I felt inside. Not sad, just full. Full of something I couldn't name yet. I didn't mean to go to the store. My feet just took me there. James was locking the front door when he saw me. He paused, looked at the sky, then at me. "You're soaked," he said. I shrugged. "Guess I like the rain." He laughed and reached into his coat pocket. "Come on, there's a place out back." We hurried through the alley, water splashing under our shoes. Behind the store was a small barn, old, wooden, and leaning just slightly. James opened the door and we stepped inside. The air smelled like hay and dust and wood. Rain tapped on the roof like a slow song. There were 2 crates against the wall. We sat on them, steam rising faintly from our wet clothes. James shook his head, grinning. "You're always showing up when I least expect it. You make it easy," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me, his smile fading just a little, but not in a bad way, in a thoughtful way. "You didn't have to come," he said, "but I'm glad you did." We sat in silence for a minute, listening to the storm outside. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Then James said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you always know?" I looked down at my hands, still damp and resting in my lap. "Not always. I just knew I felt different, like I was looking at the world through a fogged-up window while everyone else saw it clearly." He nodded. "I felt that too. Still do sometimes. It's like, no one ever says it, but you can feel it. The rules. What you're supposed to be. How you're supposed to act." James leaned back against the barn wall. "Yeah. And when you don't fit those rules, it's like you disappear, or you hide, or both." I looked at him. "I don't want to hide anymore." He turned toward me, eyes serious and soft. "Me neither." The rain picked up, louder now. We didn't move. "Do you think it's wrong?" I asked quietly. "What we're feeling?" James shook his head. "No. I think people are scared of what they don't understand, but that doesn't make us wrong." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper towel. "Here." He dabbed it on my face gently, drying the drops on my cheek. His hand paused for a second, warm against my skin. My heart pounded. Then, slowly, he let his fingers slide down to my hand. Not a grab, just a touch. He looked at me. "Is this okay?" I nodded. Yes, our fingers laced together, damp and trembling. We sat like that, hands clasped, as the barn filled with the sound of rain. Nothing else happened. No big kiss, no music. Just two boys holding hands in the quiet. It felt like everything. After a while, James said, "You make me feel like I'm not alone." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You make me feel real." The rain slowed to a drizzle. Light filtered through the slats in the wood, catching the tiny particles in the air like floating stars. James squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. When we finally stood, my legs felt a little shaky. Not from fear, from something softer. We walked back toward the road, not talking, our hands still held, swinging gently between us. Just before we reached the corner, James stopped. He let go of my hand, but not like he was pulling away, like he was tucking something secret and sweet into his pocket. People were nearby now, cars, neighbors. The world outside the barn still had rules, but something had changed between us. He looked at me and said, "Thursday, right?" "Always," I said. I walked home with wet shoes and a dry heart. That night, I wrote another page in my notebook. Just one sentence. Rain between us, and still we found each other. We started meeting in quieter places after that. Behind the hardware store, near the creek past the train tracks, in the small clearing behind the church where the grass grew tall and wildflowers leaned toward the sun. Not hiding, just protecting. People in town liked to talk. You could feel their eyes follow you, even when their mouths stayed shut. And even though nothing about what we did was wrong, we both knew the world didn't see it that way. So we carved out little spaces for ourselves, small corners where time slowed down and no one could touch what was building between us. Every time we met, we talked a little more, said things we never said to anyone else. One afternoon, we sat under the old oak tree in the clearing. The sun filtered through the leaves, turning everything golden. James leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the sky. "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to leave," he said. "Leave town?" I asked. He nodded. "Just go, somewhere nobody knows you, somewhere you don't have to explain yourself." "I think about it too," I said. "New York, maybe, or California." He smiled. "You'd like New York." "Why?" He turned to me. "Because you love stories, and that place feels like it's made of 1,000 stories, all running into each other." I looked down at my hands. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." James sat up. "I think you're braver than you believe." We didn't make big plans, no promises, just dreams, shared quietly like secrets. Later that week, we met by the creek. It was cooler that day, and James had brought a blanket in his bag. We laid it out on the grass and sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the water move. He handed me a piece of paper. It was another sketch. This time, it was a train station. Two figures standing close, holding hands, their bags beside them. You could almost feel the wind in the drawing, the sense of something beginning. "I draw what I can't say," he said softly. I stared at the paper for a long time. "Do you think we'll ever really go?" I asked. "Maybe not now," he said, "but someday, maybe when the world's a little softer." I nodded. We sat in silence, leaning into each other just enough to feel it. One night, it all came together. It was a Saturday. The stars were out, and the world felt quiet, like it had stepped aside just for us. We were behind the store again, where the wooden steps creaked and the backlight glowed orange. James had brought his sketchbook. I'd brought a poem I wrote. Just a few lines, nothing special. We traded them, sitting close. His arm brushed mine as we read. When I finished looking at his drawing, us, lying under a sky full of stars, I turned to him. He was already looking at me. There was a long pause, not tense, just full, and then, softly, carefully, he leaned forward. Our foreheads touched first, then our noses, and finally, our lips. It wasn't like the movies. It didn't crash in like a wave. It came slow, like a sunrise, warm, gentle. His lips were soft, a little nervous. So were mine. We didn't move fast. We just stayed there, close and still. The kiss quiet and full of things we hadn't said, but always felt. When we pulled away, we didn't speak right away. We didn't have to. Then I whispered, "We don't have to say it." "I know." James smiled, his eyes shining. "I know too." We sat on the steps, shoulder to shoulder, our fingers barely touching. The stars blinked above us, calm and steady. Somewhere, an owl called. Leaves rustled in the breeze. It felt like the world had finally stopped spinning for just a moment. In that stillness, without big declarations or loud promises, we made a silent vow. Not a vow to last forever, not a vow that everything would be easy, but a vow to keep showing up, to be kind, to listen, to hold each other's truths like fragile paper hearts. I think those are the strongest vows, the ones no one hears but you. We stayed there until our legs went numb, until the air turned cold. And even then, I didn't want to go. When we finally stood, James reached for my hand. "I'll walk you home," he said. So we walked, slowly, fingers twined together under the stars. No one saw us, or maybe someone did, but I didn't care, not anymore.